If you don't know the point of life, also known as the purpose of life, then how are you going to live it? It's like trying to operate a complicated machine without really knowing what it does. You just press buttons randomly and you don't even know what to expect. Why am I talking about the real purpose of life in these times when the economy feels shaky and people are nervous about many things, including AI taking over their jobs, and the growing wealth gap, and so many other things that are causing massive confusion to people? So, before talking about how to deal with all of these issues, I want people to realize the purpose of their lives. Like, what are we even doing here? I've spent decades looking for the answer, not in religion and not in complicated philosophy. The answer I've found is actually practical. It helps you decide who to marry, how to work, and how to be fulfilled, which will result in being happy. The answer is really simple to understand, but it's made of many elements, so bear with me as I unfold this seemingly complicated question, and you'll see how simple it actually is. Once we do that, I'll explain why I think it's hard nowadays to achieve our purpose. It all starts with understanding a simple truth about biology. The purpose of all life in general is to reproduce itself. That's it. It sounds too simple, right? But it gets a lot deeper than this. First, let's think about it for a minute. Think of all the various forms of life that we have on our planet. They all want to reproduce. So the question becomes, why does life want to reproduce? And what about mankind? Is our purpose also to reproduce, like all the other life forms? Here's where things get a little tricky. While I do think that our purpose is to reproduce, I also think there's a lot more to it than just reproduction when it comes to us humans. Now, I know what you're thinking, because people usually ask about what is the ultimate plan? Like, why reproduce in the first place? Are we a part of some sort of experiment? Some sort of grand plan by the designer of the universe, right? I promise I will get to that later. But first, let me briefly explain why life's purpose is to reproduce. Then I'll talk about how that relates to mankind's purpose in this universe. I promise this is the deepest statement you'll ever hear about this matter. So buckle up, because we're going back in time all the way to the very beginning, the Big Bang. We have to understand the fundamental conditions of the universe. What we know with verifiable evidence about the universe so far is that it began in a state of intense energy and chaos, exploding outward. This is what we call the Big Bang. Ever since that moment, the clock has been ticking toward cooling down, toward the ultimate stability. So the underlying state of existence is chaos. It is like the engine that keeps things running. You see, without chaos, there would be no life. In fact, there would be nothing interesting. On the other hand, there's this stability, which is the ultimate destination for all matters. And the ultimate stability for the universe isn't nothingness. It's a state of perfect, uniform existence. Scientists call it heat death. It's like the chaos I just mentioned scattered everything, and so the universe became so spread out and lukewarm that no complex reactions and no life can ever happen. That lukewarm soup is the default end state for everything that exists. I know it sounds bleak, but it will be a while before we get there, so don't worry about it for now. These are basically facts about our universe. You can do the research yourself and verify what I'm saying. So 380,000 years after the Big Bang, atoms were formed. And we have all of these elements randomly smashing one another, creating these endless chains of actions and reactions, eventually creating planets, stars, and galaxies. And when a certain set of conditions were met, like the conditions of our planet, not too close to the sun and not too far, has water, basic elements like carbon and oxygen. It has atmosphere, magnetic field, and a moon that acts like a stabilizer so Earth doesn't wobble. All of these conditions allowed a new type of chemical reactions to start taking place. And these conditions are very rare to come together. No wonder that we don't see life anywhere close to our planet. because so many different things have to align in order for these specific chemical reactions to happen. I know it's an extremely low chance to have a planet with just the right conditions, but because of the unbelievable number of planets and galaxies out there, this extremely low chance becomes inevitable. So, are there other planets with the same conditions or similar conditions to our planet and therefore have some sort of life? I would say absolutely, 100%. They just might be way too far and way too spread out, and I don't think it will be possible to encounter them, and it won't be a good idea to do so anyways. But that's a topic for another video. So life is basically a chain of specific chemical reactions happening in a specific order. In other words, life is a form of order that is happening in the middle of this process of matters getting pushed by chaos to the ultimate stability state. At first, life started as a simple cell, or maybe just a self-copying molecule. Most of these early life attempts were just chemical dead-end, meaning they were systems of chemical reactions that quickly got overwhelmed by chaos and dissolved back into the bland uniformity. So you can say they reached their ultimate stability. So for a cell alive, just means it's constantly fighting to maintain its internal order, but it can't win that fight forever. Eventually, chaos wins, and because of this chaos, these living cells were forming in a variety of ways until a few cells happened to form in a way that allowed them to self-replicate. Reproduction was the loophole, the closest thing to a workaround. It's like a second chance, a respawn. And every time it respawned, it got a little better at it because of the principles of evolution as Darwin discovered. These successful cells were the beginning of life as we know it. They were the result of this dance between chaos and order. And so we are here because these cells were able to pass on the gene that enabled them to reproduce, while the other type of cells got extinct forever because, well, they didn't reproduce. So this ability to reproduce is like a genetic code that lives inside of us. It's embedded in our existence so deep that it goes back billions of years all the way to these early single cells. So why do we have to reproduce? Simply because we're programmed to do so. And why are we programmed this way? Because of the symphony being played between chaos and order. It's the inevitable product of the conditions of the universe. The way the universe has been, and the way things played out since the beginning resulted in life. But for some reason, this answer seems like it's missing something, which is why a lot of people don't accept it. These people are convinced that there's more to life than just to reproduce. Which, as I said earlier, I think there is more to life than just to reproduce, at least for us humans. But this is where people make mistakes. They start thinking that there's a grand plan for everything, that there's a designer, a creator that made everything, and he has plans for us. I'm going to make a video about religion, but for now, let's assume that yes, there is a creator. I would like to ask what possible plans he would have for us. Is he like raising an army, for example? Is he looking for servants or employees, perhaps? Is this some sort of screening process? Or is he just having fun? Is this a game for him? And by the way, why is he hiding? Why not communicate clearly to us and present his plan if there was one? I don't think there's an answer that really makes sense. Which is why most people who believe in a creator say that they don't know what the plan is. And so we just have to have faith that it is going to be a good plan. Some people might be satisfied with this answer, but for me, it doesn't make any sense. So I just can't believe it. Why should I accept this claim when there's no logical or material evidence? If presenting evidence is not required, then how exactly are we supposed to know the truth from the lies? I think philosophers have been debating this question for thousands of years because they probably didn't have the evidence that we have today about the beginning of the universe and the early single cells. Other people say that we're in some sort of simulation, right? I'm sure you heard that. The simulation theory, believe it or not, makes more sense to me than the religious explanation. But I don't think it's true either. I think those people who believe in this theory have spent too much time working with computers that they forgot what the real world looks like. Here's why I don't think we're in a simulation. You see, I've worked a lot with simulations earlier in my career as a computer animator. I used to run fluid simulations, dust and gas simulations, and even clothes and hair simulations. Anyone who's worked on computer simulations would tell you that they take a lot of time to complete. And they require a huge processing power. So they used to give me this $120,000 computer called Flame Machine to do these simulations. And guess what? It still took a long time to finish. What makes a simulation take a long time to process is the amount of details that you want to have. And so a good simulation artist would be very efficient when creating simulations. And so they would find ways to have a lot of details in the areas that we're going to see and use less details in the areas that won't be seen in the frame. All of that is to reduce the processing demand because processing power is limited. Doesn't matter how fast the computer is, it's still limited. And it consumes a lot of energy. Now, when we look at our universe, do you think it is detailed or do you think it's skipping some of the details? What about the areas where no one is looking? The fact that you can grab anything and put it under a microscope and keep zooming while you're seeing all kinds of crazy wild things happening right down to the atoms. Even those are made up of particles that are doing their thing. Can you imagine the number of atoms in the entire universe? I don't think anyone can. They want to tell me they're all being simulated. Even those in the furthest, darkest corners of the universe, where no one is looking. Whoever is doing this simulation must have access to an infinite source of energy, which can't be true. I would consider believing in the simulation theory if, for instance, we go to the bottom of the ocean and we would see nothing there, for example. Or at least, we grab some sort of crazy looking fish, but once we open it up, we just see like it's hollow in the inside. No organs, no biochemical reactions. It would be evidence that whoever started this simulation was trying to be efficient and to, conserve energy and to conserve some processing power. And so they didn't put too many details in areas where they thought no one would look. Like inside a fish from the bottom of the ocean. But that's not what we see in our universe. It's astonishing how unnecessarily detailed and intricate everything is. So we established that the universe pushes toward death, and life fights to stay alive. How does life win this fight? By passing the torch, by reproducing. And because this is so critical, nature made it the most pleasurable thing you can possibly do. If you listen to your body, it is always trying to remind you of this purpose through our sexual desire. This applies to all living beings, not just us. That's why sex feels good. Your body is rewarding you with dopamine and other hormones because you're doing what it wants you to do. And notice that what makes us attractive are traits that are directly related to reproduction. For example, men are attracted to feminine features like women's breasts because they are crucial for babies' survival. Also, the curvature of the hips, which indicates that the hips are wide enough for a baby to pass through during birth. Other physical attributes like hair, lips, symmetry of the face are gauges for overall health and genetic quality. On the other hand, women are attracted to men that are reliable, capable, gentle, and loyal because during and after pregnancy, women can be very vulnerable. So they rely on their loyal partner for their survival, especially after giving birth. For them, having a good partner can mean the difference between life and death. Men's physical attributes are also important, but to a lesser degree. That's why women take more time in a relationship. They need to determine how reliable the man they're seeing is, which takes time. So you can't rush a woman in a relationship. You see, this all falls into the reproduction purpose. I know what you're thinking. If reproduction is our purpose, then shouldn't we just keep on having children nonstop? And what about those who can't have children due to medical or genetic reasons? Does that mean that they lost their purpose in life? Remember when I said earlier, I think there's more to our lives than just reproduction? Here's what I mean. While our main purpose as living beings is reproduction, our purpose as human beings is to make living conditions and overall life experience worth reproducing. And so we can do so by minimizing suffering while maximizing enjoyment in a sustainable way for as long as possible. And not just for ourselves, but for all of mankind and all of the living beings out there. That's why it feels good to help other people or even other animals, because again, your body is rewarding you for doing what you're meant to do. And that's why it feels horrible when you hurt other people. You're going against your purpose. So to go back to the earlier question, should we all just keep on having kids nonstop? The answer is obviously no. Not until we make sure that all of these kids are going to have a life worth living, a life with minimal suffering and maximum enjoyment. Once we understand this simple purpose, so many things become clear. Like the question about morality, for example. Many people think that morality must have come from somewhere outside of mankind because who can decide what is good and what is bad? Well, now that we know our purpose, it's a lot easier to understand morality. You see, morality is basically the code that determines whether or not a certain action helps us achieve our purpose or prevents us from achieving it. So, for example, if we're all killing each other and stealing and deceiving and living in fear, are we creating conditions that make life worth living? In other words, are we minimizing suffering while maximizing enjoyment for as long as possible? The obvious answer is no, which is why all of these things are immoral. What about doing drugs? They make you feel good, right? Isn't that maximizing enjoyment? The answer is still no, because the joy you get from drugs is short term, and the devastating effect they have on people's health causes huge suffering not just for them, but for the people around them. Remember, the purpose is minimizing suffering while maximizing enjoyment in a sustainable way for as long as possible. This is one package, because that's how you make life worth living and therefore worth reproducing. So if you're living your life in pursuit of this purpose, then you're a good person because you're doing what you're supposed to do. You will feel happiness every time you make progress toward this purpose. If you're helping other people fulfill their purpose while you're at it, it makes you a great person. However, if you're hurting other people while you're trying to achieve your purpose, then you're evil. You see, evil people are basically living their lives trying to minimize suffering for themselves while maximizing enjoyment. And maybe they want to have kids or leave some sort of legacy behind, just like everybody else. But what makes them evil is the fact that they're willing to step on and crush other people in order to get to what they want. So it's this willingness to hurt other people as long as they get what they want is what makes them evil. Okay, so what about the people who can't have biological children for whatever reason? Or those who decide not to have children yet they live happy, fulfilling lives? That is certainly possible as long as they're making life worth living for themselves and the people around them. Because in doing so, they're ultimately setting the conditions that help other people have children, and so mankind continues, even if it's not through them directly. I know what some people might be thinking. If our purpose is to reproduce, and make life worth living, then the whole thing is meaningless because we're all going to die. In fact, the whole universe is going to reach that ultimate heat death. So what's the point of all this? This is where religion finds its way again into people. And so they believe in eternal life after death. Like, if something is eternal, then it becomes meaningful. I don't think these people understand the concept of eternity. Like, what are you going to do in heaven for the first 100 years? Think about it. What about 1,000 years in heaven? 100 trillion years? That doesn't even scratch the surface of eternity. You don't need eternity to make something meaningful. Like, imagine your kids asking you to take them to Disneyland, and you'll be like, no, it's meaningless because we're gonna go there, stay for only a few days, and then we'll go back. We're not gonna stay there forever. So what's the point? The meaning of this trip comes from the fact that it is temporary, short, and rare. Life is precious precisely because it's fragile, it's temporary, and we're living in a special time when the conditions of the universe have finally allowed life to exist after 10 billion years of complete chaos. And eventually it will go back to complete chaos. There will be time when no star is visible to anything from anywhere. There will be only darkness. And so we should be grateful for being here now because we got to experience this incredible thing called Earth. So while the purpose of life is pretty much the same for all of mankind, the meaning of life is different from one person to another. You see, the meaning of life is different from the purpose of life. Because life means different things to different people. We're all living and pursuing our purpose, and some might succeed and maybe they had great journeys with their friends. And so if you ask them what is the meaning of life, they would say life means friendship. That's what comes to their mind when they think about life. Other people might live in horrible conditions. Maybe they grew up in a country torn by war. And so you ask them what is the meaning of life, they would say life means suffering. Some people might say that life is meaningless. I think these people have lost their purpose and they're living in a state of being where they are not really feeling anything. They're not really suffering, but they're not enjoying the ride either. So there's really not much come to mind for them when they think about life. Think of someone who just goes to work at their boring office job, who makes just enough money to cover their basic needs, but doesn't have much going on in their life. No real friends, no romantic relationship, no adventures, no taking risks, and no kids, but also no suffering. Like they're not on the street, for example. They're not hungry or in pain. They just live this boring life where nothing is happening. Well, of course, they're going to say that life is meaningless, right? The reason I wanted to talk about the purpose of life is to remind people of why we're here and that life is extremely valuable. Remember, it took the universe more than 13 billion years to get us to where we are today. And once we're gone, that's it. It's game over. I think a lot of people get carried away and forget what the true purpose of life is, and so they spend all their lives working for a job, or they just focus on making a lot of money, that they forget to live. Our purpose is not to work, and it's not to make lots of money. It's the other way around. We work and we make money so that we can achieve our purpose. So people who are obsessed with money don't really get it. While it is true that their lavish lifestyle is very tempting and hard to resist, I think all of these billionaires don't really get it. They need to understand that they are causing a huge imbalance in the system. And we all know what happens when the imbalance reaches the tipping point. And I think they know this, which is why they all have these underground bunkers. What they don't seem to understand is that these bunkers are not going to save them when the system collapses. Others want to go to Mars, which I really think very disturbing because they're willing to populate a dead planet that the universe decided it's not able to host life, instead of trying to make the best out of this incredible planet that we have. I think this system is not sustainable, and I really hope that we can do something about it. I'm not sure that we can save it, but I'm sure we can prepare for what's coming. Now that we know our purpose, I'm going to talk about how we can achieve it and why it is so hard in today's world to do so. So in the next video, I'm going to clear up the confusion about religion once and for all. And I'm going to list the 10 tasks that will make you achieve the purpose of life. I call them the 10 Commandments 2.0. Please understand that YouTube is very brutal and it will really won't push this video to other people unless you give it reasons to do so. By hitting the like button, subscribing, and leaving a comment, you are telling YouTube that this is a good video, and so it will push it to other people. But only do so if you really liked this video. You've been listening to the Truth Seeker podcast. Thank you so much for listening and for your support, and I'll see you in the next episode.